This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South Africa's Electoral Commission to establish an urgent audit to check extent of voter fraud. Tripoli government suspends operations of 40 firms, including Total. And South Sudan's president says country needs more than 6 months to form interim government. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Penina Kariba joins me now with all your business headlines.
Thank you, Karen. And coming up on Africa Live Business, the UK strengthens trade relations with various business leaders in London. And the Angolan president fires Sonangol chair amid fuel shortages in the country. I'll have details of those stories in just a bit. For now, back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Penina. Early vote tallies suggest South Africa's ruling ANC party will retain power after Wednesday's election. Analysts, however, say the share of the vote could fall below 60% for the first time since the end of white minority rule. Vote counting is ongoing, with official results expected on Saturday. South Africans voted for a new parliament and 9 provincial legislatures. According to the Electoral Commission, turnout stood at just over 65% based on votes processed so far. Well, South Africa's biggest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, looks set to retain power in the Western Cape province, which it has ruled for the past decade. Results so far indicate that the DA has won around 55% of the vote in the Western Cape, followed by the African National Congress, currently on around 30%, and the Economic Freedom Fighters with nearly 4% of the vote.
If you look at the polls of where we were in November, we were at less than a 50% majority. We were sitting at a 45% according to the polls. And so we had to get out there and we had to work this election. And I think we have worked it. I can feel it. It looks like we're retaining the province, which is really great news. Thank you very much to those voters standing in the rain. That was really great.
This was a crucial election nationally. It's about the future of the country rather than which party you like. And I'm hoping that President Ramaphosa gets a strong enough mandate in order to do the reform process both inside the ANC and continue it in the country. So this is probably for me the second most crucial election from a national perspective after '94.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Electoral Commission says that it has established an urgent audit to check the extent of voter fraud. The decision was taken after the Commission met with political parties who raised concerns about the supposedly indelible ink being easy to remove. An unconfirmed number of people have been arrested in KwaZulu-Natal province for casting more than one ballot after removing their ink. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
After the May 8 election, the electoral body has been inundated with reports of irregularities. The most troubling for the Commission and political parties is the allegation that the indelible ink used as a safeguard over the years to prevent voters from voting more than once is easily removable from the thumbs. It's an issue that is troubling everyone concerned, but political parties seem to be happy with the process undertaken by the electoral body.
We agreed as the political parties in the PLC, in the Party Liaison Committee, that we're happy with the fact that we will investigate, find the truth, and that all of us also said that we didn't want the counting to be stopped, and we didn't want South Africa to be kept in suspense. And we think that's fair enough. We think that what is important is that people who disrespected our democracy must be brought to book, and they must be brought to book now.
It's always a question of what is called materiality. So even with the double voting, the question ultimately is going to be, is it material to affect the overall result? If it's yes, then we're in a dangerous situation. If it's not material and the IEC can demonstrate that it's not material, in other words, yes, there was fraud, there was cheating, but it won't affect the overall result, then we're fine.
The IEC is not taking this matter lightly.
We are confident that our system is strong. It will throw out the exceptions so that we can investigate them. But we recognize that there are concerns. We are not trying to evade those concerns or trivialize those concerns. We are grappling with them to give you the assurance that we know our system gives us.
The body says for now it will only announce results in locations where they are completely confident that the results are correct. But this does not mean the final tally will be delayed.
By law, the Electoral Commission has 7 days in which to announce the results of an election and is confident that this exercise will be completed in time to provide assurance of the integrity of the results within this period.
Many political party leaders have now converged at the results center with their eyes glued on this results board. Outside of the issue that is still being investigated, counting continues. A quick jab at the election results board indicate that the governing party is leading, but pundits maintain that the party will lose support this time to opposition parties but will remain in power. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
To other news now. In Libya, the internationally recognized government has suspended the operations of 40 foreign firms, including French oil giant Total. According to the government, the firm's licenses had expired. Total pumps more than 1 million barrels of oil a day in Libya. Ties have been strained between Tripoli's government of national accord and the French government due to France's support of General Khalifa Haftar. The decision to suspend the firms comes after the Prime Minister of the Tripoli-based government, Fayez al-Sarraj, met with President Emmanuel Macron. Following the meeting, Macron called for a ceasefire. France said it viewed the eastern-based military commander Khalifa Haftar as a key player in rebuilding Libya. Haftar's troops have been trying to take control of Tripoli but have faced a counter-offensive from troops aligned with the Tripoli-based government. Well, now let's get you more on this from Adele El Mahrouhi, who is on the line for us in Cairo. Adele, Libya's internationally recognized government has suspended the operations of 40 foreign firms, that's including French oil firm Total. Can you tell us a bit more about this and what it means, coming just a day after Sarraj held talks with President Macron?
Well, first of all, there hasn't been an official statement from the Libyan government yet about the 40 companies that have been suspended. It is a report by Reuters, but neither also the French government or Total have released any response, at least so far. But accordingly, there are 40 firms. It seems that on that list, the only known company to have major operation in Libya is the French oil giant, as you said, Total. In general, it seemed that when Fayez Sarraj was meeting Emmanuel Macron in Paris, that he had the French government support, which clearly in a statement and in all the press releases when Sarraj was meeting with Macron has rejected and totally refused Haftar's military operation on Libya. It said it strictly, France strictly gave Sarraj the recognition and refused to recognize any military solution to the conflict in Libya. However, that has been the similar stance for France before, and it's also during which there have been reports of French support to Khalifa Haftar and his forces in general. So it is still not clear about the exact reasons behind the ban of these 40 companies, or even if there's a sort of connection between these 40 firms. In any case, the announcement comes at a time on Thursday where Khalifa Haftar has been welcomed by the Egyptian president for their second meeting since Haftar has declared his rally and move to control Tripoli. El-Sisi today renewed his support to Khalifa Haftar and his counter-extremist, counter-terrorism and counter-militias operation. So there is a renewal of statement for Haftar's support. On the other hand, it seems that after his tour in Europe, Sarraj did come back more or less empty-handed without any significant progress in the political, at least the international support he was looking forward to.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Adele El-Barouhi there for us in Cairo on what's happening in Libya. Well, continuing with Libya, the International Criminal Court is now warning parties involved in the conflict there to refrain from targeting civilians or risk being charged. Addressing the United Nations Security Council, Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda called on military commanders to ensure that their subordinates adhere to the rules of engagement. Here's more on that.
As the battle for Tripoli continues, deaths of both combatants and civilians are rising. More and more people are leaving the city in their quest to escape the turmoil. Amidst the twists and turns, the International Criminal Court is watching the unfolding situation.
My office stands ready to investigate and, where appropriate, to prosecute any persons party to the ongoing armed conflict should they engage in conduct constituting a crime within the jurisdiction of the ICC.
According to Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, commanders of both armies and militias supporting them will not be spared if their juniors violate rules of engagement.
Where a commander knew or should have known that their subordinates were committing or about to commit crimes and failed to take all necessary and reasonable measures within his or her power to prevent or repress such crimes, the commander may be held criminally responsible.
The government of the National Accord, the only legitimate government established based on the Shkirat Agreement, hopes that the Council will place the situation in Libya at the top of its priority list through continuous coordination with the Special Representative of the Secretary-General, Mr. Gassam Salame, to achieve peace, security and overcome the current impasse.
She has also expressed her frustrations at the failure to apprehend the late Muammar Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, together with his co-accused, whose arrest warrants are yet to be effected. The three are wanted by the court over war crimes allegedly committed during the 2011 uprising that toppled Gaddafi.
The status quo is not sustainable. Impunity for atrocity crimes is hardly conducive to bringing peace and stability to this war-torn country. I take this opportunity to renew my call for state cooperation with the arrest and transfer of ICC suspects, and ask this Council to lend its support by taking a clear and vocal position in support.
Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar is leading an armed campaign to oust Western-based government of Fayez al-Sarraj. Calls for a ceasefire have been ignored by both. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
To Nigeria now, and the northeast has suffered severe devastation since the beginning of the Boko Haram insurgency in 2009. The government estimates that it would need around $9 billion to restore the region. President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated the Northeast Development Commission to carry out the difficult task of rebuilding a region that is still battling the Boko Haram insurgency. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
Ravaged by 10 years of Boko Haram insurgency, the scale of the devastation in northeast Nigeria is mind-boggling, especially in the three states of Borno, Yobe and Adamawa, the playground of the insurgents. Over 20,000 have been killed in the insurgency, and with an estimated 1.9 million people forced to flee from their homes, the United Nations describes the region as harboring one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. 7 million people are said to be in need of food, shelter, water and sanitation support. Over 1,500 primary and secondary schools are estimated to have been destroyed, with over 2,295 teachers killed and over 19,000 others displaced. That's the scale of the challenge these men and women who make up the Northeast Development Commission have been asked to address.
You shall be the focal organization to assess, coordinate, harmonize, and report on all the intervention programs and initiatives that the federal government or any of its ministries and agencies are involved in the region. Commence the process of resettlement and rehabilitation of internally displaced persons to their original homes or new communities in order to bring social cohesion in the zone.
The government is budgeting around $28 million as take-off grant for the assignment, but that amount pales into insignificance when you consider that the UN has earmarked about $847.7 million to meet critical needs of displaced people in the region in 2019 alone. But the head of the commission is not deterred.
We will meet and decide and choose our priorities. First, we look after the destitutes, those people who are scattered all over the country. Then we decide when to go to our headquarters in Maiduguri, start planning the the real agenda, the master plan for our activities, and then commence with earnest what's ahead of us.
It's a very difficult assignment that this commission has undertaken. How quickly funding is made available to the commission would determine the speed with which it can move and the difference it can make on the ground. But while the rebuilding effort is on, Boko Haram is still active in the region. That's one problem the government has got to solve if this rehabilitation effort is to gain traction. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Uganda prepares for a possible surge in refugee arrivals from the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. And we continue with our coverage of the devastation left behind in Mozambique in the wake of Cyclone Kenneth.
For look at economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Sudan's President Salva Kiir says forming a unity government in the country should be delayed by up to 1 year. This comes after the Council of Ministers of the East African regional body, IGAD, met in Juba this week and endorsed a 6-month extension period for the formation of a new government. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
South Sudan's government is asking for more time for security reforms. The peace agreement signed last year between government and opposition groups had provided those reforms should be completed in 8 months. IGAD has already delayed that process by 6 months, but Juba says it needs even more time.
We don't need to go back to war. We don't want to declare the agreement to be declared to have collapsed, but we want to come up with a government that is acceptable to all of us.
South Sudan's government says the reforms require $300 million in funding. It involves putting armed groups in camps and providing training, as well as measures to unite the various armies. Some soldiers, including children, need different arrangements so they can return home. However, some of South Sudan's opposition groups say a further delay in forming a new government only benefits the current administration.
There is not going to be another extension. The 6 months are not extendable. You cannot extend them more. So we have a very big responsibility to make sure that we do everything within the 6 months.
The United Nations also warns delay in forming a unity government could push some armed groups to resume fighting in parts of the country.
Right across the country, people saying the same thing. Enough is enough. We want public services, we want education and health, we want tools to cultivate our lands, and we want roads to open up commerce.
There are also armed groups opposed to the current peace arrangement who continue to fight government forces. Some opposition groups here say it would be better to press ahead and form a new government within the 6 months delay period IGAD agreed. South Sudan's government insists the country's peace deal could collapse completely if enough time isn't given to carry out reforms. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Clashes between security forces and militias in the Democratic Republic of Congo have left at least 8 rebels and 5 soldiers dead. The clashes happened in Ituri and North Kivu provinces. Here's Chao Mgono with more on that.
In the first incident, Congolese soldiers responding to an unarmed attack on the town of Butembo killed 8 rebel fighters. The attackers had targeted a military base. A border soldier was killed and his gun taken away.
The city suffered an attack by rebel forces who wanted to bring death and suffering to this city. Fortunately, our forces and the police have demonstrated what they are capable of. They were able to contain the situation. The peacekeepers serving under the UN mission in Congo helped us in repulsing the attackers.
This morning, in response to the attack in Butembo, MONUSCO immediately deployed a rapid reaction force to support our Congolese armed forces partners who were engaging the attackers.
Butembo is considered an epicenter of the Ebola outbreak, which has killed an estimated 1,000 people. However, frequent armed attacks by militias, which are locally known as Mai Mai, has hampered efforts to curb the spread of the disease. Medical response has been marginally scaled down by various agencies.
For obvious security reasons, the United Nations Security Service has suspended all movements of personnel working in this area, where many people are currently deployed.
In the neighboring Ituri province, 4 soldiers were killed when other militia attacked yet another military base. Ituri is one of the provinces in eastern DRC that are also rocked by militia activity. Armed groups engage in deadly confrontations for the control of mineral deposits in the region. Chamgono, CGTN.
In Uganda, the UN Refugee Agency is preparing for a possible surge in refugee arrivals from the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. UNHCR says the deteriorating security situation in eastern DRC and the equatorial region of South Sudan is pushing more refugees across the border. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria reports.
The UN Refugee Agency says 34,000 new refugees have arrived in Uganda this year. Hostilities among armed groups in the DRC's North Kivu province have led to people fleeing their homes. The Ebola outbreak in the DRC and possible spread by those fleeing is further complicating the situation despite strict measures at the border. And in South Sudan, violations of ceasefire agreements have been reported, which is causing clashes between the armed parties. UNHCR warns it may not be able to manage providing the necessary assistance if this continues. And while Uganda's doors remain open to refugees, the continuous arrivals is stretching available resources. Uganda is home to around 1.2 million refugees, most of them from South Sudan. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Well, earlier we spoke to Robert Kwesiga, the Secretary General of the Red Cross in Uganda, on the country's response to the possible spread of Ebola from refugees coming in from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
The working figure confirmed by both UNHCR and the government is to prepare to receive around 40,000 refugees from the two countries. Now, as Red Cross being one of the key partners with the government and UNHCR in this response and preparedness, we are looking at how are these people going to be supported as they enter across the borders into Uganda, so around the entry points, and also when they are shipped or transported into the settlements, making sure that the basic requirements are there. The border preparedness in Uganda on high alert, and basically it looks at how do you screen people coming into the country. And as Red Cross, we are the key pattern at all border crossings and all the border crossings on the border with Congo, where we are doing screening for the people coming from Congo. 2, we are doing what we call risk communication for all the communities that live along the border with Congo, whereby our staff and volunteers move from house to house, from communities to communities, sensitizing them and informing them on the dangers, but also on how they can send information in case there are suspected cases. All that is needed to support the refugees if they come into Uganda, even those already in Uganda, across board, we are underfunded. Not only us as Uganda Red Cross, but other agencies that are involved. So, but for any emergency response, there are when people come in as refugees, what do you need immediately? So they need shelter, they need food, they need water, they need clothes, name it. Now, in all these are in short supply.
Moving to other news now, the devastation caused by Cyclone Kenneth in Mozambique is getting worse by the day as major international relief agencies call for more funding. Over 200,000 Mozambicans have been affected and remain without access to food, proper shelter and clean drinking water. Our reporter Daniel Arapmoy is in Cabo Delgado province of Mozambique and brings us more.
Aid agencies are calling on the international community to assist communities affected by Cyclone Kenneth in Mozambique. The agencies say they need increased funding and logistical aid for thousands of people affected by the cyclone. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says only 30% of the $282 million required in Mozambique has been met, leaving a funding gap of 70%. The UN body is not alone. Many other international disaster response organizations are struggling to respond to the crisis in Mozambique due to lack of funding.
We are currently facing challenge with funds because we are also responding to the Idai cyclone, and we also have now the Kenneth cyclone. So this is just to say that UNICEF is stretched in terms of funds availability. We have a huge funding gap.
According to government estimates, Cyclone Kenneth affected more than 200,000 people, destroying homes and damaging food crops.
Much more needs to be done, and us together with the Mozambican Red Cross and the International Federation of the Red Cross is trying to meet the most urgent needs, and what we need is more help, more financial needs so that we can help those who've been left with nothing.
Mozambique is one of the world's most vulnerable countries to natural disasters and climate change. Tropical storms and cyclones are irregular occurrences.
Weeks after Cyclone Kenneth destroyed the province of Cabo Delgado, life remains a long way from normal. People here have no money and no groceries. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN, Cabo Delgado province, Mozambique.
Recap of our top stories now. South Africa's Electoral Commission says that it has established an urgent audit to check the extent of voter fraud. The decision was taken after the Commission met with political parties who raised concerns about the supposedly indelible ink being easy to remove. An unconfirmed number of people have been arrested in KwaZulu-Natal province for casting more than one ballot after removing their ink. Libya's internationally recognised government has suspended the operations of 40 foreign firms, including French oil giant Total. According to the government, the firm's licences had expired. Total pumps more than 1 million barrels of oil a day in Libya. Tripoli's government of national accord and the French government have had strained ties due to France's support of General Khalifa Haftar. The decision to suspend the firms comes after the Prime Minister of the Tripoli-based government, Fayez al-Sarraj, met with President Emmanuel Macron. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir says forming a unity government in the country should be delayed by up to 1 year. This comes after the Council of Ministers of the East African regional body, IGAD, met in Juba this week and endorsed a 6-month extension period for the formation of a new government. In Uganda, the UN Refugee Agency is preparing for a possible surge in refugee arrivals from the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. UNHCR says the deteriorating security situation in eastern DRC and the equatorial region of South Sudan is pushing more refugees across the border. And those are the top stories that we're covering for you. Let's now go over to Penina for the latest in all the business news for you.
Thank you, Karen. Coming up on Africa Live Business. The UK strengthens trade relations with various business leaders in London. And the Angolan president fires Sonangol chair amid fuel shortages in the country.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Business leaders from across Africa are in London this week for an investment conference focused on promoting development on the continent. The potential to tap into Africa's unbanked population is huge, with 70% of activity still in the informal sector. CGTN's Terry Wangari filed the following report.
Business leaders from around 40 countries are taking part in the Africa Financial Services Investment Conference. The event is focused on developing financial services and innovative products for Africans.
When you look at Africa and its economies, it's a patchwork of different countries pushing and pulling in different directions. So the thing we're most interested in is areas where it's underpenetrated and underserved. The fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, the people that aren't in the middle income class, kind of the lower and the lower middle, is where there's a lot of kind of innovation in banking services. So that's the type of innovation that we like, kind of at that affordable price point, giving them convenience so they don't keep the money under the mattress, they can transact from their phones, and it's a quality product.
South Africa, Seychelles and Kenya are widely seen as the top markets in Africa in terms of access to financial services. With the development of mobile money services like M-Pesa, which initially started as a SIM card-based money transfer application. It's given many Kenyans without access to the formal banking network a way to become financially connected.
Well, what makes me happy is that the African consumer is very happy to embrace technology and is really pushing people like ourselves and other players on the continent to be as innovative as we can be to serve them.
And it's not just local partnerships. As Britain prepares to leave the European Union, it's looking to develop stronger ties in other parts of the world.
finance is the lifeblood of any developing economy and developed economy, and so finance from the UK into Africa is going to be a really important part.
The potential to tap into Africa's unbanked population is largely unexplored. If the continent wants to reach its potential, it needs to continue to innovate its financial services while at the same time focus on accessibility for all Africans. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Angolan President João Lourenço has dismissed Carlos Saturnino as the head of the state oil firm Sonangol amid persistent fuel shortages in the country. This is the second time in less than 2 years that Lourenço has shuffled the leadership of the oil major, which has been under financial pressure over the last 5 years. Sonangol is currently at the center of Lourenço's vow to revive the country's crude output, which has dropped to the lowest level in more than a decade. Despite being the continent's second largest producer, Angola is currently experiencing one of the worst fuel crises in the Southern African nation's history. Still on mining matters, Barrick Gold Corporation says it may have to force an end to stalled talks with Tanzania over the fate of its subsidiary Acacia Mining. Acacia has been at odds with Tanzania's government since July 2017, when the state handed the London-listed gold producer a $190 billion tax bill, saying it falsely declared bullion exports. The Tanzanian government has since banned Acacia from exporting gold and copper concentrates from the country. The gold producer, which has been negotiating with the government on behalf of Acacia, reached a settlement proposal in February, but a final deal is yet to be agreed. Drivers for ride-hailing service Uber have taken to the streets in major cities around the world to protest against working conditions and wages. The stoppage comes just a day ahead of Uber's IPO, which is expected to be the largest among new tech stock debuts this year. CGTN's Beryl Oro explains.
Uber drivers have been fighting for years for the right to unionize and negotiate better pay. So far, they have failed. However, they have found another way to flex their power. A loose network of rideshare drivers in major cities across the US and the globe turned off their apps on Wednesday to protest low wages and other gripes. The fallout comes ahead of Uber's IPO, which is expected to be the largest among new tech stock debuts this year.
We need a driver's cap, and we need it right now. We need it right now. We need it yesterday. Another thing we need is driver safety. The only thing we're asking for is driver safety as well. For instance, I was attacked by a passenger. Before. The only thing we're asking is something simple, like maybe put a face on the passenger's app so we know who we're picking up. We need to know who we're picking up.
Uber has been cutting driver pay rates in major cities to boost its bottom line as it prepares for its initial public offering. That has infuriated its drivers, who say they are already struggling to make ends meet. They are particularly angered by the fact that Uber investors are expected to reap millions, even billions of dollars from the IPO because of their labor.
We want the passenger fare to be regulated. So right now, the amount that passengers pay isn't regulated. That needs to be regulated. 80 to 85% needs to go to the driver because they're the ones doing the work. We also want to stop unfair deactivations where drivers are just, basically fired without any just cause.
Each group has its own set of demands, but most want a firm cap on Uber's commission from each ride, which varies widely but averages about 33%. Right now, Uber drivers in the United States earn an average of $10 to $12 an hour. It's unclear how many drivers will continue to take part in the stoppage. However, the latest strikes marks a pivotal moment for the so-called gig economy, which relies heavily on its workers. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And now to the latest on Huawei CFO's extradition case in Canada. Meng Wanzhou will be back in court in September to fight her extradition to the US. Meng is charged with fraud relating to US sanctions on Iran. She's been confined to the Vancouver area since being detained in December. On Wednesday, Meng's lawyers laid out her case in greater detail. CGTN's Hendrik Seibrandi was in the courtroom and filed the following report.
It's a trip Meng Wanzhou has become quite familiar with, the 8-kilometer drive from her home in West Vancouver to British Columbia's Supreme Court downtown. It's been 5 months since the Huawei executive was picked up by Canadian police on a U.S. warrant at Vancouver Airport, an arrest she and her company claim was completely wrong.
We have maintained that her U.S. ordered arrest was an unlawful abuse of process, one guided by political considerations and tactics, not by the rule of law.
On Wednesday, Meng's 4 attorneys told a judge there are 3 major problems with her case. One, they said allegations she misled banks into doing business with Iran are untrue.
Nice to see you again. It was made clear that the business activities by Ms. Meng were conducted openly and transparently with the full knowledge of banking officials.
2, they argue that what's considered a crime in the U.S., in this case fraud, has to be a crime in Canada for an extradition to the U.S. to be legal. They said that principle of double criminality does not apply here. And 3, the lawyer said Meng's 3-hour airport detention on December 1st violated the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Her luggage was searched, her cell phone and other electronic devices were taken at the direction of the FBI, and she was compelled to reveal her passwords.
Meng's representatives say evidence key to the defense remains with the authorities and they want it turned over. Prosecutors maintain Meng's alleged misrepresentation to banks put their economic interests at risk, and they say there's sufficient evidence for her to be extradited. Each of these issues will be considered prior to any extradition hearing. A Huawei spokesman promises more bank-related information central to the case will be released soon.
We have trust in the Canadian legal process, and we look forward to seeing Ms. Meng's freedom restored.
But first, a hearing to determine whether Meng's extradition is even warranted. She's due back in court for 8 days beginning in late September. That's when this complex case moves into a new phase and a new season. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, Vancouver.
We shall leave it there for now, but later on Global Business, Uganda launches a second round of bidding for exploration blocks. We shall bring you details of that story and, of course, plenty more. That's at the top of the hour. For now, it's back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Penina. Well, we are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... From one generation to another, statelessness haunts Ivorian pastoralists.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Ethiopia is known to be home to the world's rare and precious black lions. For decades, some of them have been living in an old zoo in Addis Ababa, which has been criticized for endangering the lives of the pride. Now, authorities in the Ethiopian capital have been showing off the new enclosure into which the city's 10 rare black-maned lions will move. CGTN's Giram Chala has more.
This most famous zoo was established by Emperor Haile Selassie I in 1948. And these lions are the 8th generation of lions since the former emperor himself donated few rare black-maned lions back then.
The first generation of these black lions came from Wolega, east of Ethiopia, from a particular place called Gumer. That is during the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie I. He gave 7 of the lions as a gift to this zoo. Since then, now these lions, the 8th generation of what we call the precious black lions, they can never be found anywhere else but here in Ethiopia.
These rare black lions, alongside other animals in this old zoo, still are frequently visited by local and foreign tourists every day, with a payment equivalent to few US cents.
I feel good because I see a lot of things here. I see lions, I see a lot of things, so it's very nice. So we pay only 2 birr in Ethiopian birr. Everyone is here to come and enjoy. So I'm so happy.
The decades-old zoo, however, is no more a comfortable place for these lions to survive. It's too small, too untidy, and too crowded for Ethiopia's only black lions. But there is a good news. Addis Ababa has been building this new state-of-the-art zoo park for the last 3 years. The close to $4 million enclosure will begin operations in just a couple of months' time.
In general, our plan is to establish 6 ecosystems, representing a sample of the Ethiopian ecosystem. The one that you have seen is the Blue Nile ecosystem. It is the Blue Nile riverbank ecosystem, where we keep lions. It is now under construction. 98% has been completed already, and I think we are ready to open that.
The 6 female and 4 male rare black lions will soon move to the near-to-be-opened makeshift natural habitat. The new enclosure incorporates innovative designs and space where the lions can live in a well-protected, open and comfortable landscape. This, therefore, is not only going to help conserve the lives of the pride, but also generate Ethiopia better hard currency from the soon-to-increase tourist numbers. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Africa has one of the largest stateless populations in the world. In Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, thousands of pastoralists, mainly from the Fula community, are yet to be recognized as Ivoirians so many years on after independence. Here's CGTN's Dinah Matenga with the details.
From one generation to the next, statelessness stalks Ivorian pastoralists. Aminata Sidibe and her family belong to the Fula community, a traditionally nomadic community that roams through 10 West and Central African countries. And even though Aminata has always lived in Kong, none of her family members has Ivorian nationality. Though most of her family members were born in Côte d'Ivoire, they have no claim to citizenship. Citizenship is conferred only to those of Ivorian ancestry, not to those born on Ivorian soil.
God saw that my parents came here. I was born here. They died and left me here. I was even married here, had my children, and my children had children. If people say I'm not from here, what can I say?
Across the world, millions of people are without nationality. They face a lifetime of inequality to such basic rights as education, healthcare, employment, and free movement. Like many Fula, the Tal family raise cattle but cannot own land. Their grazing rights were usually private agreements with the original owners, which does not confer actual legal land ownership. They also cannot apply for formal jobs, open bank accounts, or get a driving license.
This is where I live. If you don't have legal documents, you're excluded from a lot of opportunities. If you don't have papers, you are a nobody.
Over decades, migration and civil strife have uprooted people across West Africa. UNHCR is working with Ivorian authorities to eliminate statelessness, but thousands remain in legal limbo. The process of naturalization in Ivory Coast is complex, even for those with a birth certificate. Many Fula don't have a formal education and cannot read, making the legal process even harder. Some of the youngest in the Tal family go to primary school and dream of careers in the legal sector, but they will need university degrees to reach their goals.
I want to become a policeman to stop people fighting and waging war.
We want our children to get their papers so they can go further in their studies. It is very important to us.
After leaving as outsiders for 4 generations, the Tals are now placing their hopes in the generation coming up now. They hope that someday they will gain Ivorian citizenship. Dina Matengo, CGTN.
All the sports news coming up for you after the break, including Nigeria's government charges President of the Nigerian Football Federation, Amaju Pinnick, with misappropriation of funds.